I like to say that I had a PhD in pretending because I knew how to put on the mask and pretend like everything was okay, even if I was really hurting or broken on the inside. And I think each of us are trying to figure out how much relational margin we really have. If we open up and tell our whole story or show our whole self, will we be rejected? Will we be abandoned? And I think each of us are kind of trying to negotiate all the time our ideal self, our real self, and then kind of the person we project out to others.
You actually left the faith for a time, which I did as well. So what was happening in your life that caused you to do that?
Yes. So I think that the pressure to perform finally got to me. Like I just could no longer contain it. And I think we all have that breakthrough moment, even though it looks like a breakdown, it's actually a breakthrough because I had that moment where I realized like nothing in my life is as it should be. And I finally just started to own it. And I remember driving around town, and at the time I used to smoke cigarettes. I was smoking a cigarette and I parked in a parking lot. It started to rain, literally buckets of rain. And I just started shouting at God, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Because I just could not see him and I couldn't experience him. And that kind of quiet desperation that you're talking about, that loneliness and isolation, I was feeling all of that. And I just got so tired. And so I remember shouting that out to God and asking him for help and admitting to myself for the first time that I could no longer hold it all together. And I had been struggling with addiction, addiction to drugs, abuse of alcohol, eating disorders, perfectionism, dysfunctional relationships. I mean, I had really run the gamut and I was absolutely at the end of myself. And I think that sweet cry to God, just to say, like, help, like, I need help. My life is totally unmanageable. Everything is completely out of control. Will you help me? And sensing, the love of God, the presence of God, the Spirit of God in such a way that I knew he was real and I knew he was tangible. And I knew I didn't have to clean myself up first for him to accept me and love me and welcome me. And that was the beginning of my breakthrough. And for sure, it looked like a breakdown.
Well, isn't that the truth, right? The kind of thing like admitting failure to God, just telling him that you're at the end of yourself and really showing him just everything about you seems like the worst idea, because we know he's holy. And yet that is always the beginning of something beautiful and something new. And I think, letting God love you in that moment, I know how transforming it can be. And, in your life too, that wasn't the only thing that happened. You actually had a trauma that impacted all of this. You say it happens to 1 in 5 college women in the US. What happened to you?
So my sophomore year of college, opening weekend of school, I was sexually assaulted on campus by a guy that I knew. And yes, it does. It happens to 1 in 5 women on college campuses here in America. And that's just reported cases. I mean, I never reported mine. And in all my 20 years of working with women, I have only known 2 women who bravely and boldly went to report that this sexual assault had happened to them. And it was a very difficult time. I remember waking up the next morning and going on about my life as if nothing had happened because I didn't know how to process it. I didn't know how to deal with it. And this is true for so many women and therefore so many men, because the person who perpetuates the problem is also experiencing a major level of trauma. Yes, it looks very different, but the person who is doing this, something is seriously wrong. And I think that going through that experience made me want to become an advocate for women. It made me want to become a voice for women. And it made me want to open up and share my own story when I found out how many women this is happening to. And I desperately want people to know that they are not alone. I mean, I think that's one of the through lines of understanding that we need as a human to flourish is to know that we are not alone, that the isolation and loneliness we experience is something common to people, but that it can also be resolved. Like that real relationship, telling the truth, owning your story, that all of this really is the key to living your life with some kind of holy courage, like holy gumption can shine through in those moments of our deepest difficulty.
I so admire you and congratulate you for talking about it, because I really do think shame is the thing that comes in right after that and shuts you down. You can never get healed if you don't talk about it. So many things happened after that, finding out you were pregnant. There were so many things, but just talk to me about healing. How did you begin to heal from that trauma?
Yeah, I think the first step is identifying that I was not okay. And we don't always give ourselves or others the permission to not be okay. We struggle sometimes with big emotions that we think are toxic, like anger or grief or sorrow. But these are all first steps to us really coming out of denial and recognizing that we have an issue, that we have a struggle, that we have a problem. And so that was kind of the first step, is admitting that it happened and being willing to look at it and being willing to share it with another safe person. I can remember a beautiful friend coming over to my house. She had actually called me and said, "Is everything okay?" And I was like, "I'm fine, I'm fine." And she just did not buy the stuff I was laying down. She knew I was not okay. And 5 minutes later, she showed up at my door, knocked on the door, and then she literally laid down on the floor with me. I burst into tears and I began to cry. And as I recognized that she was with me, she didn't try to fix me, save me, advise me, give me a book on healing from sexual assault and, all the other things I was dealing with, but she did just lay with me as a presence. And that showed me, it deepened that groove that God had already showed me in the car that night, that I was not alone and that I didn't have to be perfect in order to be loved. And I didn't have to get it together in order to not be rejected by others, that I could take my mask off and people would receive me that way. And that receiving that from God and from others began to open me up to be a safe place to provide that for others, because we all have issues, problems, and pain. It is something that we all go through. We all have character flaws that we're working on. That's common to humanity. And I think the more that we own that, the freer we will be and the greater depth and meaningful connection we will experience in our relationships.
Oh, that's so good. I just think of people watching who've experienced a form of abuse, whether sexual abuse, domestic abuse, whatever it is. What encouragement would you give them to help them go further on that road of healing?
I think that I would encourage you to get help. There's nothing wrong with getting help. Sometimes we put stigmas around opening up and sharing and inviting other people into our process. And if you are in that place, and I've been there too, where maybe you're lonely and you don't have a person in the world that you can call, you don't have family or friends to fall back on, or you're kind of stepping from your old life into a new life that's more healthy with, better and safer relationships, I would encourage you to get third-party help. There's things like therapy, there's support groups. I'm 18 years sober. There's recovery groups that, you can step into where you will be received with grace and with goodness, and you will encounter the kind of hospitality and welcome that leads to healing. And so I just encourage you to be okay with the fact that you need help. In fact, to welcome that and to go get what you need.
So inspiring. I hope that there's so many people out there that heard that. We have prayer lines, of course, as a resource for you as well, 1-866-273-4444. We definitely want to make sure that you get whatever support you need, and we can hook you up with supports as well. Before we go, I just want to touch on your new book. So you have a new book, Love is the Resistance, and I could see that you were feeling a lot of frustration with kind of the division that we've been watching here from Canada, particularly in U.S. politics, but also faith is woven into that as well. Tell me what you want to do with this book.
My deepest desire with this book, my hope for this book, is to give people the opportunity to help the church have a better witness. And I want people to understand how to engage in healthy conflict. And so the practical tools, the ways of communicating, to be able to say, okay, there is a conflict. What do I do? How do we get along even though we disagree? How do we connect with one another again after there's been a breach in relationship? And I feel like these communication tools and understanding the reasons we don't get along really do lead us to have better, healthier relationships in and out of the church.
Okay, so just before we go here, give us a couple steps on how we can get there, because, obviously we've watched it happen in the US to a much greater degree, but it's still, social media, we control people and get away with it and say things that we'd never say in real life. So what are some steps we can do to be more loving and work toward being unified?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is understanding. Everybody has a context. There is a reason that you do why you do what you do. And there's a reason others are doing what they do. They have a culture, they have a history, they have a background. So the first part is to have understanding. And the second part is be willing to be brave and have the conversation. There's so many conversations that all of us are avoiding or putting off or sweeping under the rug. And so we have to be brave enough to say, you know what, I need grace for this conversation. I don't know exactly how to say everything that needs to be said. And I don't even know how this is going to go, but I know that if I value our relationship enough, we need to have this conversation. So will you just go there with me? And I think those two things are a great catalyst to incredible conversations.